We've seen another Irv dream in season 1. We don't know how prophetic that one is going to be, but it seems like something about his innie dreaming unlocks some secrets about Lumon. Welcome back to the break room. That's right, it's time to discuss the absolutely mind-blowing episode 4 of Severance season 2. We're gonna get into this episode. I'm very excited to talk about some very specific things that happened in this episode. I'm John Costa, and hey, I wouldn't trust her, not even televisually. It's Gina Ippolito.
We should eat it.
And he's Chaos's whore. It's Erik Voss.
Hey, hang in there.
Evan, our great producer, is there in the producer desk taking questions from your chat boxes. So send those in. We'll get to those after we get into the kind of meat and potatoes of the episode. But let's get into it. Episode 4, biggest thing, print a shirt. Gina was wrong.
My streak has been broken. I was wrong in the worst way too. I was like, nah, too obvious. And then also, even when they revealed it, I was like, what?
Well,
it was good.
Because Britt Lauer was incredible in that moment.
Yeah.
Right? And in this episode in general, like her switching from like Helena lying and pretending to be Helly versus her being Helena versus her actually being Helly was fantastic. I think it's very interesting. Some of our chatters after the episode 2 episode, or was it episode 1? Pointed out there was no elevator ding.
Yeah.
When Helena was going up in the elevator, and we sure got the elevator ding, even though she was being drowned in a river.
Yeah.
A river, by the way, the byproduct of the largest waterfall in the world. Incredible.
Can't believe it.
So let's talk about that. You know, there's 2 parts of this. It's both sort of this reveal and the implications of Helena being involved with the severed floor employees for this amount of time, but also I want to talk to you guys about Irving and sort of like his discovery of and suspicion of Helena.
Yeah. I love it. He was so good too, just like screaming, "She's an Eagan." The fact that he figured that out, like it wasn't surprising that he figured out that it wasn't Helly, but that he knew, like he did the logic of like how many people have the power to go on an unsevered floor. Like to go on a severed floor and be like unsevered, and he like did all that like mental logic as he had his hypothermia induced snow sleep.
And we have a clip of this dream that he was having that we can throw up real fast. Obviously in this dream you kind of see the letters forming Eagan. You kind of see Helly's face before we get jump scared here. But it's worth pointing out that like his subconscious is probably doing most of that work, and then it's just kind of being, you know, deciphered or whatever in Irv's dreams. We've seen another Irv dream in season 1. We don't know how prophetic that one is going to be, but it seems like something about his innie dreaming unlocks some secrets about Lumon.
Yeah, Irv has the most storyboarded construction subconscious of any character in all of fiction. Like my subconscious is just like, I don't know, drifting to nebulous anxieties that manifest in monstrous forms. And it never has a specific, but I guess we're watching, you know, a David Lynch, R.I.P., inspired Twin Peaks dream sequences have symbolic meaning in television. And I think this is the second time we've seen Irv dream. Irv innies any Irv dream, and innies normally aren't supposed to sleep, but like we've talked about this before, how Irv, because he's an artist on the surface, that an artist's brain might just be wired a different way to see order in the chaos of the subconscious that we normally cannot see. And so he had all the clues that Helena was an Eagan, and that there was something off about her, but he needed to go into kind of this dream state in order to put all those pieces together. But there's just other stuff in that dream state that don't really serve that goal. Like, why was Bert there? Why did he see woe? Why was woe necessary to that? I just have so many questions on like, why are we seeing Irv dreaming? Like, and what does it mean that he dreams?
And on the topic of woe, too, Obi-Wan Kenobi asking, do you think we'll see other humanized forms of the Tempers this season? Do you think that was like something reaching out to him, or do you think that's just the byproduct of hearing something a little scary before you go to sleep, you know?
I mean, this was definitely like the scariest episode. This was like the spookiest one. I was telling these guys before it started that if anyone remembers the book Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, the drawing in Dieter's book of Woe looked like a scary story to tell in the dark. They always had the stringy hair and she's like balding on top. And I was like, ooh, this is like the spookiest episode so far. I don't know if we're going to get another. The thing that I like about the show is that the episodes are never the same. Like, they're never the same vibe. Yes!
The pale woman from Scary Stories.
Pale
and I
woman.
believe there was a version of it in the movie.
Ooh.
Yeah, or maybe that's, I don't know. And if she's
Yeah.
great,
I did love when Milchick was like, and this story that is terrible and creepy and weirdly sexual now is a picture book, everyone. Take a look.
The Thieving Nanny.
I do love it. Listen, I go camping a lot, and telling scary stories around. There's nothing better. And the fact that this was like part scary story and part part religious tale and also part corporate propaganda. It's the scariest story of all.
Yeah, I think that the story shifted from just like almost a parable, right? There was like the prodigal son a little bit, and there was almost a bit of Goofus and Gallant worked in there. Like the good brother did this, the bad brother turned into a tree.
Yeah.
And then it turned into body horror. Like it didn't seem like anything in particular triggered it. It wasn't until Helena afterwards, like, he masturbated. And that's why his eyeball popped out. But it was like he didn't say that in the paragraph before. He's like, we just told rhyming jokes until our gullets ached. And then I was watching him as his eyeball popped out. And then pause.
They talked about seed spillage.
That's it. But that could mean a lot of things. Now, when I first heard that,
the parable of the sower, totally.
well, when he said it earlier, I was like, I got to get my mind out of the gutter.
No, that's what I thought too. I immediately was like, he jacked it onto the forest floor? Okay.
Spilled the seed. And I wrote that into the script, like joking. I'm like, I'm going to have to remove this later because everyone's going to be like, Erik, you're disgusting. And then when Helena says it, I was like, I was right. These writers are as disgusting as my brain is.
I like that the innings are like sort of too innocent. Like they're like, okay. And she's just like, he's jacking it.
Well, and is this, I mean, I don't even know if you could say this is the first time an innie has had sex. We don't know, obviously, but Mark appears to be some level of reintegrated in this episode. While him and Helena were having an intimate moment in that tent, he sort of saw his wife in that moment. In a similar way to how he was kind of flashing in and out at the end of episode 3. But it's hard to tell exactly where he is consciously because there was a big gap from the end of episode 3 to this beginning of episode 4. We're going to get more into that in this discussion. But first, I want to talk about, like, you know, what have we learned about Lumon? That's sort of how we like to start all of these episodes. And it's hard to have that conversation because so much of this could be lies.
Yeah.
We got some new terminology. We've got Ortbo, which is a... Thank you. It's an outdoor retreat team building occurrence.
John has good vision.
I was going to say.
Contacts are contacting today.
Shout out Contacts.
Hey, shout out.
This is us when we like eat our way around Burbank. We're going to eat our way around the restaurants of Burbank at an outdoor something occurrence.
Can we do that now?
I would love to.
Bye, everyone. We're going to Corner Cottage.
No potatoes. So the question, I guess, is like, hey, do you think that this was, and at some point Milchick says, like, your Audis all agreed to this, which, again, I don't know if I believe. What do you guys think? Is this the first time that Lumon has had to put together an Ortbo? Did they just kind of throw this thing together last minute?
No, I think they've
because
done.
As a response to seeing Mark potentially being reintegrated. I don't know. What do you think?
I think this is something that they have had on the books to do before. I don't know how many times they've pulled this lever, but I think they've done it before. I'm just like, I'm still, after watching this episode, so confused. I don't know if we are in a danger room, Truman Show, simulated environment, or if we are actually outside. Both are equally implausible to me. Like, because obviously for Lumon to be able to simulate all this shit is like crazy high def.
Yeah.
And it's more than even like Mysterio's drones in Spider-Man Far From Home. This is just insane that they'd be able to do all this.
But there's a third option, right? Like they could be in like underneath Lumon. This could be it could be like a fake sky,
good
but
point.
there could be just like the goat field that we saw.
Because at one point, Dylan says, I knew there was not going to be a ceiling or something like that. But if
Yeah.
you've ever been on the Pirates of the Caribbean, they sort of dupe you and think that there's no ceiling,
Yeah,
even though you're inside of a
I
warehouse.
guess this
But
one
then,
would be the Truman Show option, where it is everything is
if
practical.
we
it's
get a
just
big
not
light
nearly as
falling from
big.
the sky, it's game over. But all of the innies sort of expressed for the first time, oh, this is what it's like to be outside. They've never
Yeah, they don't
experienced
know.
outside. So I do think there could be some trickery happening.
And they don't know. They have no idea what outside means.
Yeah.
And we, the viewer, may just be seeing their naive impression of what outside is, and then it translates to us, the viewer, as legitimate outside. But it's just, there's all these clues. It could go either way. It seems like they're walking in a big circle if every one of those shadow people's pointing to one direction. It seems like there could be analogs, but there must be some body of water that, Helena Eagan is worried that she's going to be drowned in. It can't just be all fake, because otherwise she wouldn't worry.
Right.
There have to be like different levels, like upwards of 70 feet. Awasteen Falls is 70 feet tall. And then I don't know how tall Sam's Point is. This is all in a national park in New York State. Like, they have to have somehow simulated, that would have to just be a massive room. We'd be talking about like acres and acres of real estate down there that could all be lit through incredible power sources. We did see these giant power columns outside where Mark got reintegrated in episode 3. I was wondering, like, what are they generating power to at
They
this
also
facility?
own a whole town. Like,
Yeah.
like they do own a whole town. This would be like, I wouldn't put it past, Disney has these living facilities where like you go and it's literally every single person in the town is with Disney. So I wouldn't put it past them to be like, okay, we're going to build an entire place, but like we're going to make it underground, which means we have to simulate the weather and simulate this. Yeah, I don't know which of these three options is the most plausible.
They all have logical gaps in it. Like, for it to just be an actual outdoor reserve somewhere, okay? Let's entertain that idea. Kier PE, all we know is that it's some town that's in some remote, snowy location. Could be in northern Michigan, the UP, could be Canada, could be upstate New York, could be somewhere out west in the Rockies or something. We don't know. Could be its own sovereign nation. PE is not, it doesn't stand for anything that we know of. But this implies that they own hundreds, potentially thousands of acres of national park. And for them to have called it Did Eagan National Park, but any Dylan not knowing who that is weird, because it's saying that like a national park is named after someone who's no one's ever heard of before.
Yeah.
So that's weird. The shadow innies pointing them are wearing indoor office attire. How did they get out there? They seem to be robotic. How did Irv survive overnight if he was just wearing a coat and a snow? He would have died of hypothermia. How did they get there?
There's also no breath, which I know that like not every person puts breath like cold breath in post. But this does seem like a show that would go that extra mile, and if it was supposed to be cold, they would put it in the after effects. And because there's I've camped in the snow in New Jersey and it is miserable. I did almost die. I had to get up at like 2 a.m. and build up the fire and sit by the fire so I wouldn't die. So the fact that like he's just so chill about it and is like, well, I've slept outside, but I'm fine.
Yeah,
Like-
and I would say that these are just like, narrative,
Yeah.
whatever, shortcuts, but they make such a big deal of the danger that Helena Eagan is in when she's drowning. They are in an outdoor environment. We have all been watching Yellow Jackets. We know what happens. You could be wearing the heaviest coat. You have no headgear. He wasn't wearing his hat when he was going to bed, and you can't just sit out in the snow away from a fire. Doesn't matter how many layers you have.
Yeah.
If you're not in a tent, if you're not in some kind by a heat source, you're gonna die. So this kind of stuff is bugging me, but I understand it's even crazier to say that this is a danger room simulated environment. I understand that's crazier. It's just so many surreal things happen in this episode that I am doubting everything.
I mean, just to jump in with a thought of my own is, could it be that, we've talked a little bit while we've been covering this show about a third like personality or something like that? Is there a way that Severance, the chip or the little thing, can alter that kind of mind state, right? Can bring them into a collective consciousness situation, right?
Like they're all kind of got an internal Apple Vision Pro.
Yeah. The best
a
Apple
shared
Pro ever.
hallucination.
Yeah.
At the break room, we love food, but it can be tough to eat well when you don't have the time to cook, okay? Unless you use Factor. Factor has chef-made gourmet meals that make eating deliciously and eating well easy. They're dietitian approved and ready to heat and eat in 2 minutes. Factor can help you feel your best all day long with wholesome smoothies, breakfasts, grab-and-go snacks, and more add-ons. Factor arrives fresh and fully prepared, perfect for any active, busy lifestyle. With 40 options across 8 dietary preferences on the menu, each week it's easy to pick meals tailored to your goals. Choose from preferences like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto. For instance, if you're trying to lose weight, you can lose up to 8 pounds in 8 weeks with Factor Keto meals. I just heated up the grilled pork chop and smoked cheddar cauliflower. Ooh, and it's got some roasted zucchini and poblanos. It smells delicious. The studio will stink of delicious food for hours after I consume this, okay? Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/breakroom50off and use code breakroom50off to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code breakroom50off at factormeals.com/breakroom50off to get 50 off plus free shipping on your first box.
I also want to go to the chat for a second. There's a lot of people kind of sending in stuff. Some fun compliments here. Jack Johnson sending in a super chat on YouTube.
Whoa, Jack
saying,
Johnson's watching?
John Stin, but I'm sure he enjoys some banana pancakes as well. I'm injecting this live into my veins right now. This episode was shot so beautifully. I love the confidence in the storytelling and the episode order. Yes, John brought up the confidence and the script the screenwriting as well.
Yeah, this is my favorite so far.
Yeah, me too.
Great.
What a curveball, right? I really thought episode 4 was going to be like, oh, it's going to be a crazy montage episode that jumps. It's going to be like what Loki season 2, episode 5 was, like after everything blows up, and then Loki's just, it's like Groundhog Day through history. Not at all. This is just completely out of left field.
But I don't remember if it was just you and I talking after the stream ended last week, or if we talked about it all as a group. But one of the things we talked about was like this show's ability to mind fuck you at the end of an episode, and then the next episode be like, we're going to do something else for a little while. They did it at the end of season 1. They're doing it again here. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't get a resolution of what exactly happened with Irv immediately in the next episode.
Well,
we haven't seen the Audis in a little while. I think that they could probably go back to that world
And it seems like a lot of people are thinking that if we do get another Audis episode, that again, this jump in time, this kind of like playing with the events of and how we're interpreting it. I don't think there's like anything as like out there as time travel per se. I think that's something people were suggesting, but definitely the timeline of events and how we as the audience are being told them.
I agree. I don't know about time travel, but I do think that they could probably manipulate the innies and outies to not understand time and their place on a timeline, right?
Yeah,
I don't know how long my Audi, like how many days my Audi was walking around as an Audi or as an innie.
Yeah, I mean, they told them it was 5 months when really it was 4 days, so.
Right. Oh, yeah. And even that experience, that construct of it. Yeah. Fundamentals podcast saying, so I started watching Severance last week only because I had seen New Rockstars was covering it, so I knew it had to be decent. I'm hooked. I watched the first season and first 3 episodes of second season in 18 hours.
Wow.
Let's go. That's
Wow.
Your innie needs sleep.
I wanted to kind of bring it back to the Keir and Dieter Eagan story, right? Lots of people asking about the twins. You know, we had brought up that they're dressed up in office clothes, but like, who were these people? They had different actors and things like that. And also, like, is Obi-Wan Kenobi asking, is this park even like the same cliff that Keir Eagan has been pictured on? Is the story of Dieter Eagan real? What was with Helena's reaction to that? You know, how are you guys feeling about this whole lore dump that we've been given?
I do think that, like Eric's point that, you know, that people on the outside would have heard the name Dieter Eagan before, and like, you know, he wasn't a figure in the museum. Like, to me, this smacks of propaganda that's like, if you're bad, this is what will happen to you. That they created this character as a foil to Keir More so than like, I mean, it's also possible he's just like a brother that was like, I'm going to be a school teacher. And they were like, ew, school teachers aren't being corporate overlords. Like, get out of here. We're erasing you from the Keir family book. But no, I don't think he masturbated and turned into a forest.
Well, I disagree with you there. I do think that like they could just also be in like Yellowstone National Park and be like, and just so you know, this isn't called Yellowstone National Park. It's named after our
That's
founders
true.
because they're great. We know
But
Lumon lies a lot.
But
It doesn't
there's so
necessarily
many
have to be called
variables.
that, right?
If you're like at a public place, there's so many variables that they can't. That's
You
why
think they
I would
accidentally
think that
wandered
they would,
upon a hiker taking a shit in a cat hole,
I
and we're
mean,
like,
listen,
hold on.
You never know. We don't even see like snow animals in this forest. Like it just seems too controlled, and they seem, especially with how things have been going, it seems like there would be too many. Like, yeah, what if a hiker got off trail and was like, "Hey, who the hell are you guys?" And they were like, "What? We thought this was Dieter Forest." And he's like, "No, this is Yellowstone, bro. You want some Doritos?"
They shot this at Minnewaska National Park Reserve in upstate New York. I don't know if it's upstate New York, but it is outside of the city of New York. And it's a beautiful, beautiful park that I'm sure anybody from that area will be able to tell you. I've never been, but just the pictures, I'm like, I want to go just to visit this place. The waterfall's called Awastine Falls, and there's like a river that it flows into, and there's a lake as well. That lake can freeze over. Obviously, they put Totoro on like a different setup. He was not out on the ice. I guarantee you, he wasn't out on the ice.
No one can afford that insurance.
Yeah, I think when it comes to the story of Dieter, it is like, I think there are probably examples of this of like corporations and media organizations that both control the legend, the canon, and have a value in presenting the removed, rejected canon. Like, they can now control the power of urban legend, when really urban legends are supposed to be grassroots, organic things that happen from just like word of mouth, from ghost stories that people tell each other, from conspiracy theories, from just like whatever, old wives' tales is what it was. But nowadays, you're starting to see media organizations try to make it seem like they actually like, oh, we're gonna show you the behind the scenes of this, or this was too dark or too whatever, or like the whatever cut of something like this, right? And I think really the example is Warner funding the Snyder Cut. I think is like a good example of this. Is like Warner saw a profit opportunity to try, and it backfired on them. I don't think anybody liked Warner anymore that year, and everyone got pissed off at Warner when they were putting everything on HBO Max now. But like when these studios and big organizations try to control, like Avoid the Noid is like another one of them, like these little things that we're still profiting from it. Dieter is that. They always have this side story of Dieter, and they're presenting it as like a ghost story to scare them back onto the right path. It's Goofus and Gallant, and Dieter is Goofus. And like, there's a story of if you frolic too much, if you get goo-goo eyes for each other, if you have, idle hands are the devil's plaything. And I think the subtext of idle hands is like, what do idle hands do if you don't got enough work to do? And I think that's what they're saying.
They get covered in hairy palms.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah.
And then I get into this in the Easter egg breakdown, but like there is kind of like an American, and it wasn't specific to America, but there is like, they call it the Protestant ethic. There was a philosopher called Max Weber, who in the early 20th century wrote this whole treatise that was his like response to Karl Marx, basically, of like, why does capitalism spring forth from these Protestant economies in Europe and in the United States? And it's because there was like a work mindset with Protestants as opposed to Catholics, where you can control your own destiny by working really hard and being economically profitable. And that is proof of your destined
Greatness.
your greatness, and the fact that you'll be saved. It's, they say salvation is gained through faith and faith alone, but there's also just like a different mindset with a lot of Protestant religions of like, if I am economically prosperous, that is a sign that I'm going to heaven. So I'm going to prove that through my life. And I think you see that, and I'm sorry if I'm singling out Mormons. I just know a lot of Mormons, and all the Mormons I know I love, but like there is that mindset within the Mormon community of like, work really hard, make a lot of money, have a lot of kids. because that means that you're one of the chosen people who's going to heaven. If you are that, so be that. So I think that kind of lends itself to like Lumon's ideology of work really hard, work, because that you will be on the Kier path, not on the Dieter path, who just kind of frolics and he's the prodigal son, you know? Yeah.
We hate frolicking. Tony McHale sending in a super chat saying, "Hi guys, just here for the vibes today." Thank you, Tony, regular YouTube viewer. David Fieldsen sending in a super chat, also saying Irving secretly reintegrated, knew he wasn't in danger. I think this episode may prove that at least if he has been reintegrated, it's not to the effect that PD and Mark have, or at least we assume Mark have been under. But I want to bring it back to what John was talking about before Mark's reintegration, right? That was the last thing we saw in episode 3. Did not play a huge part in this episode except for when him and Helena are making love, so to speak. But Tyler Bradstreet on YouTube, that's it on Twitch, asking like, so is he integrated? Does Mark S know? Like, where do we think this is on the timeline of reintegration? How effective was Rigabi? You know, how are you guys?
I think it's after, but I think it's a slow process. And also the fact that she said like, oh, she learned some tips. Like maybe it's not boom all at once. Maybe it's like, oh, a couple of sessions to do this. But yeah, I think it's like, if your brain is slowly healing. Yeah, like maybe you need to come back for it to get that tattoo removed a few times. But yeah, if your brain is like slowly healing, or even after like a traumatic event when you're remembering things, it's usually not like all at once and boom, you're half mark and half marks innie. I think it's like a slow trickle of information. And that's what happens when he like sort of sees his wife. It's like, okay, it's starting to bleed over.
Well, and this is something that we talked about on the post show last week, but Rignabi's line to Mark, which she's cut off when she's saying this, is, I can weave together a version of you that still loves her and a version of you that. So like, we don't know how much Mark S is in, this person that we're seeing right now. And so it could be like a lot of innie Mark versus only a little bit of outie Mark.
Also, the chip still exists in his brain, right? Like she just sort of deactivated.
Yeah. It's not like she went in and pulled it out. She was hovering that kind of like magnetic thing or wave emitting.
Yeah,
device.
yeah. So I would imagine that like when they do flip that switch, it is like maybe he's like maybe when they flip that switch, he's innie Mark with some memories of outie Mark, and then when they flip it back, he's outie Mark with some memory. That would be maybe my guess.
I think that's, it seems like it is a process. There are things with this Mark in this episode that from the flashing of Helly's face into Gemma, I think that was one moment. It caught him by surprise, though, and I think that's the only time that happened in that episode. But he also knew, weirdly, what Irving's life was like on the outside, that he had a bad experience. And Irving blamed Dylan for snitching on him, but Dylan never did. I think, didn't Mark only get that from Milchick? Like the outie Mark got that information?
Well, and when Irving comes to the elevator, when they're first back together, Irving like is silent and won't talk to people and all that kind of stuff. So I think you could imagine, you wouldn't know the specifics, but you would imagine he had a bad time as
able to guess
on the way
But
out.
he does seem less wide-eyed, I will say. Like Adam Scott's such a great actor that when he's like outie Mark, he's like so beaten down and like depressed. And when he's like innie Mark, he's like, "Hi, how are you?" And to me, this was almost like sometimes he was a little bit more subdued.
Yeah. I think either way, though, episode 3 ended with him in his basement with Rigabi. So whatever happened in that procedure, it still wasn't like completely completed, I guess.
Yeah.
Enough for him not to go into work the next day or the next week, because wherever they are right now, Lumon is in control of the situation. So like that outie, even if the reintegration process began, it was still kind of like, okay, I'm still going to go and I'm still going to check into work. I'm still going to go on this, whatever this is, this Ortbo thing is.
Yeah.
Like he had to, I don't know. I don't think Lumon is in a position now where they kidnap these people and drag them out to the woods or kidnap them and drag them down into this other floor of their facility. Like the outies, they're still enough in control of the situation with Dylan in the, the conjugal visit room. Whatever's going on with Helena, whatever's going on with Irving at the start of this episode, to where they can kind of get them to do whatever this is, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's go down to the danger room or go outside somewhere. So yeah, Mark can't be like completely reintegrated, because I think if he was, he'd be like, hell no, I'm never gonna go into work again.
Also, he'd probably be sick, maybe. Like, Petey was a little bit sick, so...
Right.
so-
Was the sickness as a result of Petey not doing
Yeah,
what
following
Robbie
the
told him to
instructions.
do?
That's what she
Yeah,
says.
yeah.
I also want to just. We've got a seal in the back.
A loose seal.
Lucille.
Lucille!
Well, I guess, and one of the questions that I have after watching this is like, well, let's just talk about the seal now that we're talking about it.
Was it confirmed that it was a seal? Because they don't know
No,
what
it
it
was not confirmed to be a seal. I was looking at it last night and I was like, that doesn't look like a seal to me.
I was trying to
Gina,
find a
this is your bugaboo here if you
listen.
want to talk about it.
Listen, there must be a Jersey Italian person writing on this writing staff. Also, Ben Stiller
Has
is
to
like...
be
he's
Italian.
like-
Has to be
Must
Italian.
be
First
Italian.
off, it has to be
Well,
Italian.
because there are some Sopranos, and everyone knows
There is
only
a lot of
Italians.
Sopranos.
But in this episode, last episode felt very Goodfellas. This had a Goodfellas moment. This episode had a Sopranos. There's an episode called The Pine Barrens where they take a Russian into the woods and then he just disappears. And apparently I went down a rabbit hole and this is like the most asked question of like what happened to the Russian, and no one will tell them. They're like, listen, you don't have to have all the answers. But that was a very spooky episode. It was like, is this guy supernatural? He just disappeared in the snow and then they had to spend overnight in the cold. If you've seen it, it's a great episode. A lot of vibes. But this, to me, as soon as I saw this thing in the woods and then the word Montauk on a computer, there was a thing around like between 2005 and 2010 that washed up on the shores of Montauk that was dubbed the Montauk Monster. And for forever, people debated what this thing was. It looked so strange. And theories ranged from like, it's some sort of hoax, like someone created this, like an old P.T. Barnum bit where they sewed a monkey to a fish and like created this weird thing. Or it was like some creature, some like prehistoric creature that no one had discovered yet. Or it was some like mutant. And then like after years, they were like, it's just a bloated raccoon. But I asked Evan to pull this picture up. This doesn't look like a bloated raccoon. So that's the Montauk Monster on the left. That's what washed up on the shores of Montauk. And that is what we're calling a seal on the right. But the fact that it was like no one in the episode knew what it was and the word Montauk was on that computer screen, this is a clear Montauk Monster reference to me.
I think you're right, and I'm kicking myself for not including this in
I
the
should
breakdown.
have messaged you, honestly.
Well, I think Montauk is a reference to it. I think the fact that we don't see a face on this corpse, but we do see a wound, right? Didn't it look, I think I saw ribs, exposed ribs, that like a huge bite had been taken out of it. And it's just because I have lost on the brain. So my mind went to, well, seal, what are seal's natural predators? You have orcas, you have polar bears, and it's like, polar bear?
Polar bear.
But we never saw a polar bear this episode.
Yeah.
I was thinking a seal. I was doing a lot of research. Are seals ever in these type of climates? And no, unless they are close to a harbor or a coastline, seals are known sometimes to swim up into freshwater streams in pursuit of prey. But this far up in a mountainous region, that is like, you know, Minnewaska is like inland. It's not by a coastline. It's like mountainous and it flows into lakes and stuff like that.
By the way, if you go down a Montauk Monster rabbit hole, this is the exact same conversation people had in like 2007 about it.
You also
They were
may
like, oh, is it-
find a video of me in middle school
Whoa!
pointing at a Montauk looking like monster going, I think we found the Montauk Monster.
You
I
gotta
love it.
stitch
I
that
love
Find
it.
his
You gotta stitch that
Find
into this
his
episode.
shame.
Here's
Find
something that
his
you
shame.
won't
Someone
find.
find Evan on YouTube at 10 years old.
Here's what you won't find on the internet. My theory for what this thing is, which could be bad. Who knows? Look, okay, so one of the things that we really know that Lumon is doing is, you know, both with the Severance stuff, they're doing some like neurological work, right? But we also think that maybe they're doing some, I don't want to say cloning, but maybe some kind of biological creation at Lumon. We don't know, right? Obviously, Gemma's body we heard was destroyed in a car accident that was on fire and her body was cremated. We don't know if that's true, but that's what the story is. You know, my thinking is if this is like a real national park that somehow Lumon controls, this could just be a dumping grounds for failed biological experiments that they're working on, and this thing happened to be one of those projects that did not work out, and it is just a weird, freaky flesh monster that Lumon has created and needed a place to discard that people would not kind of find the body.
Don't you think that everything that's out there is part of this escape room? Like they would have. I don't think it's an accident that it's there. I think that they put it there.
They probably did want them to come across it.
Yeah.
I don't know why that would be, but like I don't
think it's
know.
like a part of the horror experience.
Yeah,
Like,
it's unsettling.
oh, there's some big creature, there's a big monster, a predator out here if it ate this thing.
Yeah.
But then Lumon is just so weird about making it a seal. Who called it a seal first? Was it
Irv.
Ellie?
I don't think
Irv?
they ever did they ever
think,
say that?
It might be Mark. Let me find it.
One of the four of them called it a seal. They're like, you're right, it does. And if I were there, I'd be like, no, it doesn't. I don't know what that
like
is.
Slimy
Yeah.
and tubular for
Yeah.
sure.
What is it?
I don't know. Looks like a seal?
To see a snail, you have to see like a little puppy dog snout. And if I don't see a snout, I don't see a seal. Like even Helena knew that when she made a seal snowball.
Yeah.
How
Looked
I
much
ask,
more like a
would
seal.
one make a snowball into a seal shape? If you are in a snowy climate right now,
foam.
go outside, try to make even compact a snowball. It's hard sometimes.
I can do it.
It's a stick, but to make a seal, you can make a seal.
I think I could make a seal.
Hey,
I
on
can
our
even draw a
on our
seal.
Ortbo, we'll all go try to make
Listen,
seals.
I've made a lot of weird looking
figure all
snowmen
this stuff
in the
out.
past.
I'm gonna
let's
find
say.
Evan's shame.
We're gonna suspend the episode.
I mean, here's the thing. The Pine Barrens are also in New Jersey. Montauk is in New York. I was like, Evan, tell me you know about these things, being a fellow East Coaster.
And I did.
Yeah.
Cold Fairy 90 in the YouTube chat also bringing up this book called The Montauk Project Experiments in Time, which is a book, the first book in a series depicting time travel experiments at the Montauk Air Force Base on the eastern tip of Long Island. It's considered the progenitor of the Montauk Project conspiracy theory. So
Yes.
Oh,
okay, so this
interesting.
is like, so for East Coasters, Montauk is kind of like Area 51. Like it's like because it had a military base, and there were and because of this monster and like some other like weird things, like people would say there were lights around it. There were all sorts of like weird.
drones.
Yeah. 2005 drones.
New Jersey invented drones.
Yeah.
That's what I
No, but there were like, spooky happenings. So it's not surprising that there's a book about it.
In the comments, list off like whatever your local
Oh,
like
yeah.
ooh, your kind of spooky
Mothman
zone was.
stories.
I'm trying to think. In Orlando, there was I think they called it the Oviedo Lights. There's like a kind of a park out there, and there was like spooky lights that people thought was like a. But I'm not from Orlando. I'm trying to think. Jacksonville, there was like an old abandoned public school that had a fire erupt in it that was in the downtown area. You're from the 904. Let me know. I can't remember the number of the school.
I'm from Sacramento, so we just have like actual real serial killers. A bunch of them.
Yeah. New Jersey is a lot of woods.
And if I still lived in Sacramento, maybe I would. That place is a nightmare.
Yeah, New Jersey and New York, like since they're so wooded,
Yeah.
there's so many woody areas. Like you got the Jersey Devil and stuff like that. Yeah, Montauk there was a whole magazine called Weird New Jersey
Yeah.
that used to be like, a lot of cryptids and things like that.
But it's probably just like mafia, right?
Yeah.
It was just
They're
people
like,
disappearing
"Ooh,
because
some
organized
guy
crime.
who owed a lot of money to a bookie disappeared.
eaten
What,
by
did
a
the
seal."
monster
And
get
there
him?
was like a Bobby Moynihan character's like, hey, he was taking money. One of them monsters.
I think last note on the seal here. I also like this note from PS in the YouTube chat saying it being a dead seal could also be foreshadowing Irv's death because he's a former Navy SEAL or his father is a former Navy SEAL.
Was he a Navy SEAL?
We'll have to go back and
I
check.
think he was
yeah.
just Navy sailor. I think. I don't know if he was specialized enough to be a SEAL.
Sure.
I don't know if Irving's father was. I don't know if the SEALs existed when Irving's father would have.
Oh,
been
good
Navy.
point.
Yeah, I don't know when the.
Yeah.
I should know.
When we're waking up at 4 a.m. to react to Fantastic Four trailers, staying up late in the night to pump out content, okay, we really value the quality of sleep we get. And Miracle Made, one of today's sponsors, is helping us get that high quality sleep. The temperature you sleep at has a huge impact on the quality of your sleep. If you're constantly waking up because you get too hot or you get too cold, you gotta try Miracle Made sheets. Miracle Made's fabric was inspired by NASA, so it's also thermoregulating. That means you'll sleep at the perfect temperature all night long. These sheets are crazy comfortable, okay? Without the high price tag of other luxury brands. Plus, Miracle Made sheets are infused with silver. It prevents bacterial growth. Ooh. Bacteria, of course, can clog your pores, get all stinky, make you break out. You don't want any of that. So sleeping on Miracle Made sheets is good for your skin. Upgrade your sleep this year. Go to trymiracle.com/breakroom to try Miracle Made sheets today. And whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, maybe a hookup, and you're sleeping in their bed every once in a while and you want them to have some nice sheets, that would be a fun thing to do for Valentine's Day. You can save over 40% if you use our code BREAKROOM, our promo code BREAKROOM at checkout. You'll get a free 3-piece towel set and save an extra 20%. Man, towels, that'd be a nice thing to have over at your hookup's place too, right? Miracle is so confident in the product, it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you aren't 100% satisfied, you'll get a full refund. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/breakroom and use the code BREAKROOM to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40%. Again, that's trymiracle.com/breakroom to treat yourself. Thank you, Miracle Made, for sponsoring this episode and for sponsoring future hookups, but that'll be cut, so that's fine. We're not that far into 2025, but it's already been an intense year. I think we can all agree. There's been a lot going on, and it can be tough to unwind at the end of the day. Via is here to help you with that, okay? Via is dedicated to harnessing the natural benefits of hemp to create high-quality wellness products. Whether you're looking to improve your sleep, focus, recovery, add a little pep to your step, or just get high. Via has something for you. With products ranging from 0 to 100 milligrams of THC, Via gives you the power to blaze your own trail. Via is well known for their award-winning THC and THC-free gummies and vapes, their THCA flower, soothing topicals, and calming drops. They're all crafted with the highest quality hemp, sourced from trusted, independently owned American farms. And the best part? Via legally ships to nearly all states in the US in discreet packaging directly to your door with a worry-free guarantee, no medical card required. I have really enjoyed the 5 milligram Dream Gummies. I actually, no joke, took one last night. Really helped me fall asleep. I always struggled. The Sunday night into Monday workday, I got a lot going on in my brain. I'm worried about the week to come. It could be that's always my worst night of sleep. But I took one of these last night. Boy, I was a rock until I woke up. Okay, so if you're over 21, check out our link to Via's website. The link's in our description. Use code BREAKROOM for 15% off. And if you're new to Via, get a free gift of your choice. Thank you, Via, for sponsoring the show.
Also, people highlighting, including Wilk Morty, about the hang in there, Irving's last line to Dylan. I think it's a clue. He hit something behind the hang in there poster.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah. I love that.
You guys feeling that
It was
way?
a loaded last line for sure. It definitely meant something.
He's not dead. Is that a crazy thing to say?
Who?
Well, I mean, technically,
Irv.
here's the thing.
yeah.
Like, you can reactivate an innie at any time.
That's right.
But to them, if they never see him again, it's like it's just as good as being dead.
Yeah.
I suppose.
But Irv as a complete human is still alive.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that
right.
Irv and Bert are going to have a real lore dump scene that I can't wait for.
Yeah.
I would love to see those two together again.
Oh, yeah. Matt Patch on YouTube sending in a super chat asking, did anyone else feel like the tale was written by Ricken? I think Shri and some other people were asking about that.
fun.
Do we think that this was written by Ricken? I feel like the
would
writing
love
could go
that.
either way.
He's
but
their like on-call writer now. Like
Yeah.
they're like, hey man, we need a
That's so
lore
funny.
story. I would love it if they were like, hey, can you do freelance? We'll pay $15 for one page.
Depends how much time has passed. Here's what I'll say. Ricken so far has only been a writer from like a first person perspective, but almost like his kind of testament, his philosophy. He hasn't written fiction, like first person narrative fiction before. So I don't know. There's a very different writing styles, and I don't think Ricken's that. You'd see other like non sequiturs. Like this was kind of written in the biblical verse that Harmony Cobell and Milchick have often spoken in. Like there seems to be some kind of like church
The
sessions.
Kier Nicene Creed, there's a version of that.
I bet they have like
probably.
different stories to manipulate in one way or another. Like
Yeah.
they're like, hey, go to our story den.
Yeah.
Bring us the book that teaches them that hard work is the Lord's work. Go to our story den. Teach
Yeah.
them the book that says overeating is a sin, so that they stop taking too many snacks.
Yeah, you can't eat all the snacks.
It's just weird that like Woe is the villain or the monster of that story, right? Because if it's a story about like idle hands being, you know, it's almost like an anti-frolic story, not an anti-woe story. But like they took a step beyond that to when if your brother dies because nature reclaims his frolicked body, then you should feel nothing. Do not feel woe. Because, like, he turned to the waterfall to try to drown out his screams. And they're saying that was the sin of the story. Is, like, him not wanting to just stare at his brother while he screamed and turned into a tree. Like, he should have stood there and watched. Don't turn away. Don't try to drown out his screams. Listen. and then you're a better person for seeing the frolics get punished. I think that's so weird. It's kind of a sloppy story. So in that sense, Ricken could have written that.
It also is very, like, I've been reading a book of Aesop's fables lately, which are so messed up. Or not Aesop's fables, but like the fables that they're not the Grimm's fairy tales, but like they're what they were based on. And they are all terrible in some way. It's all
A lot of kids getting eaten. And stuff
yeah,
like that.
or like having eyes pecked out by birds, or what, you know, like cutting off a heel to fit your foot into a shoe. You know, like it's a lot of that kind of stuff. So I do think that, like, yeah, I do think they loved their weird body horror.
Yeah. Starting to bring it back to Lumon as we kind of wrap up here with some of these questions. Sarah Hatchadorian asking, do you think Dylan learning Milchick's first name and Seth will be important in any way?
I love that he spit it out at him. Like, he's like, yes, Seth.
Yes, Seth.
Also, you know, an actor that we haven't quite talked about as much because the mysteries of important, but Travis Trammell doing an incredible job as Milchick, right? Especially that scene with him by the fire. Oh my God, when he's reading that story,
Yeah.
so good.
Also, he's like a great example of, like, he was so good in season 1. Like during the like disco party, he was just like groovy enough and unsettling to be like, who is this guy? And sometimes when you blow those characters out, the actor can't really deliver, but this dude is delivering on his expanded role. He gets better every time I see him.
And this is another thing I was thinking about last night about the writing. Zach Cherry had some great line reads in this episode. Things like when he saw the like version of him, he was like, "There's one of me," or something like that.
There's also one of him in your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. He's all over the place.
That's right. They did have a yeah.
There's a shadow self in that show too.
Good for him. He had a big week this week. But, you know, like talking about characters when you're writing them, where you sort of like know exactly what they're going to say and you almost don't need to write them. I think like this show is filled with some of those characters. You know, Dylan being one of them, but also I think Milchick is sort of one of those as well. Yeah. You get like a lot of, if you as the writer probably like know what Lumon is up to, I feel like funneling the voice of Lumon through Milchick is probably something that like writers are delighted to do and have a great instinct of what Milchick would say.
Yeah, but also that art last week made it like kind of a wild card. Like I was like, is he gonna go off?
Yeah,
books
that's
because
true.
He's still pissed about that art.
I loved the contrast of all of them in the black suits and him in the white suit,
Ooh,
just
yeah.
like showing up out of nowhere.
He looks
And
like a Bond villain.
he
He
looked
looks
so
so
good.
Yeah, he looks so good.
My favorite part of this episode was like Milchick responds to people screaming his name, I think 3 separate times in this episode, which I just find very funny. If someone started screaming my name from a distance, I'd be like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do.
I do love that, like, even like Irving is like calling for him. Like he's like a baby's nanny on this. Like they're in an environment that they're not used to, and he is there. And even if they don't trust him, he's like the only thing keeping them alive.
They don't have a choice.
Yeah.
Also, totally butchered his name, Trammell Tillman. Sorry about that. I want to make sure I get that live.
Travis
correctly.
Trammell is someone very
Someone else. Someone different.
Yeah,
The
I
shadow
think
self.
him saying Seth made it like if you're writing that into that scene in the script, it's compelling Milchick to intervene in this moment. Because
Well,
until this
and
moment,
Helena
he may
says
feel
it first, right? Helena calls
Yeah.
him Seth first.
Helena
Do it,
out of
Seth,
desperation,
she says,
do it,
yeah.
Seth, and then Irving says, yes, Seth, and I think that like until that moment, Milchick may have been like a little paralyzed by seeing the future CEO of the company, and she gives him an order, and then Irving threatens him by saying his name. Like, then it's like, oh, well, they're not supposed to know my first name, so I'm definitely gonna put some insult to injury on the firing here.
Evan, did you have anything?
Yeah, last few questions here about reintegration, two kind of different angles on it. Captain Cannabis on Twitch saying, I think as long as Mark stays near a building or within a certain range, he won't do to him what it did to Petey, since Petey kind of like went to this greenhouse and was kind of like getting paranoid. Interesting kind of theory. We'll love your thoughts on that. And also, we should definitely talk about the Glasgow Block, this weird phrase that that Mr. Milchick says over the walkie, that some users like Austin Hyas in the YouTube chat noticing was in effect listed in the options from season 1 in the control room.
Yeah, when they were going to the override, like that was like one of the words. That was another option of something they can do. I to the first point of like how reintegration works, I think there's like some other kind of treatment options. I don't know if it's like geographically based. I don't know if Ragabi has that ability. I think there's just like other kind of recovery things.
Petey just didn't drink enough water.
Yeah, he didn't hydrate enough. He didn't rest enough.
He needs those electrolytes.
I do think it is like probably you need to take your magnesium tablets or something.
I mean, yeah.
What was the other point? The
Glasgow.
The Glasgow. Yeah, in the breakdown I talk about the Glasgow effect, which is like a contested term. It's not a nice thing to say because there was like a thinking of, well, people in Glasgow don't live as long as people in the rest of the UK, and it's contested. It's kind of a bullshit notion. But yeah, I don't know the importance of the word Glasgow otherwise. There's like. Maybe there's like a center. Maybe it's just like a random code word that it was developed by their Glasgow location.
A scientist in Glasgow was like, oh.
And that I imagine is a difficult thing to do when you're breaking down a show like this, because the creators of the show are making references to things that are real, and it's hard to decipher whether that has an impact on the show or if they're just naming things after, things that are familiar, like Montauk, right? Like, I have this idea and I'm going to put Montauk on the screen. Are we supposed to interpret that as just a reference to this real world thing? Or is it actually going to have implications to the storytelling of the show, like we believe Cold Harbor is, right? There's a little bit of a difference between those two things.
Again, very Losty. Like they would do things like this too, where they would like sort of base it, like the Dharma Initiative was based off of like several real sort of, for lack of a better words, like research cults from the 70s. But they're just using it as inspiration. They're not like, these people are exactly these people or those people. Yeah,
and you have to know what the writers are into. Like the Lost writers were into things like Lewis Carroll. They were into Twin Peaks. They were into Kurt Vonnegut time travel fiction. And so if you kind of knew what Lindelof was smoking and smoked it yourself, you could see the show and where it was going. With this, it's different. Like, yeah, definitely Dan Erickson's inspired by Lost and Twin Peaks. He seems to be inspired by Italian New Jersey folklore is like a big deal.
Listen, if we don't get a Godfather reference next week to round out this trio of Goodfellas, Sopranos, and Godfather, then
we're still getting a sense of it though. Like, it's not consistent yet. He's definitely inspired. Like I feel like either Dan Erickson himself or must have known someone who is involved in like a strict religious upbringing within specific religions that I'm trying to be better about not like making fun of, but or just like they might be making fun of Apple's weird corporate culture, and Tim Cook's attempt to preserve it in the era after Steve Jobs, because there's definitely a culty vibe there.
Disney is definitely one of them. You mentioned this, like the founder fable stuff a little bit, right? Like very famously, Ub Iwerks was the person who drew Mickey Mouse first, not Walt Disney, right? And Oswald the Rabbit, which they've now got rights to again. So there is like the Steve Wozniak of these companies that they do kind of touch on in this show. I think it's interesting.
Some final things here. Latin Blue and Cam Webb mentioning the walkie-talkie. The fact that Milchick is using it does show he's close enough to Lumon headquarters, potentially even with a repeater. A range of about 1 mile. Obviously, slightly different world, but helps have that real-world basis of how close they could be. And Sarah Hatch Jordan saying there is the Glasgow Coma Scale. It is, looking it up, it is a neurological assessment tool used to evaluate the level of consciousness after a brain injury. So maybe there's something there as we kind of move forward.
I like that.
But
Also,
yeah.
Charles Xavier went into some dude in Scotland and took over his consciousness in the end of X-Men.
Just kind of fucked up.
Any final predictions or thoughts about what's coming up next, guys?
I do want to pre-show. We were talking about this, and I want Erik to be able to explain this. You went into the credits of this episode and found something interesting about one of the, I guess they're not mannequins, but they're real people, one of the pointers.
Yeah, the credits of the episode refer to these 4 figures as Shadow Mark, Shadow Helly, Shadow Irving, and Shadow Dylan. Shadow. And obviously within the episode, Milchick says that they're meant to be seen as their twins, their Dieter twin. But literally within the credits of the episode, they're called Shadow figures. And Shadow Mark is played by an actor named Adam Jepson. And Adam Jepson, on his IMDb, it's out there. He put this out there. Not as a result of any leak. He said on his IMDb that he also played the man in the background, man in hallway from episode 1. So I think we were meant to see that man behind Mark in the opening minutes of episode 1 of this season as the same guy as this, as the shadow figure. And so it gives more context that was meant to be Mark's shadow, and our shadows follow us, right? That's part of what they do. There's also like a Plato's allegory of the cave thing you could look into, a shadow projection of reality versus the real thing.
If people don't remember that moment from episode 1, it is at the very first shot where Mark is running through all those hallways, and then he sort of lands at a door, and you see in the background behind him a man sort of like moves into another room.
It's
That's
the
where-
thumbnail of our first episode breakdown.
Also, we just heard like a microwave ding in the kitchen. And it sounded like we were just turned into our innies.
Well, our art boat. Fuck me. God damn it. Well, our art boat is over. Thank you so much for joining us today. Be sure to subscribe to the Breakroom channel on YouTube and give us a follow on Twitch, where we do these videos live, like we're doing right now.
We didn't get to eat our marshmallows.
Did not get to eat our marshmallows. Very disappointing. Maybe they made marshmallows out of the seal. We don't know. There's gelatin in marshmallows. That'd be an interesting place to grab that from. Hey, follow Breakroom NR on Instagram, Twitter, and Threads. Oh, before we go, we're going to be live doing a big fucking huge show on Super Bowl Sunday. Sorry for cursing. We're going to be here for like hours and hours and hours. Come hang out with us if you're not super into the game. If you are into the game, throw us up on a phone and walk into the other room when we're reacting to big trailers, something like that. We'd love to hang out with you guys. We're going to be here streaming for hours. So come hang out. All of us will be here. That's it for the episode today. We'll see you guys later. Thank you so much.